Our next speaker is the one and only Dr. Bhavani Rao, and she is a very good friend of a lot of people here, me and Gabriella. She served as the UNESCO India only UNESCO Chair in Gender Equality and Women Empowerment. And she's also the director of the AMMACHI Labs and the Center of Women's and Empowerment and Gender Equality at Amrita University. Her academic and humanitarian career are very inspiring, dedicated to participatory action research, education, implementation that focus on the mapping of vulnerability of women in underserved community, especially in rural India, but also in other places in the world. She is a principal investigator of several projects funded by organizations such as the United Nations Democracy Fund, the Indian Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship, and the National Skill Development Corporation in India. Dr. Bhavani, I give you the mic.
Thank you, Tarek, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. And I'm glad that the mood was set into a slightly more practical by the previous speaker. And so I would like to talk something that's a little more tangible, because our work is very much in the present. And while we're thinking of the future, we have to act in the present. And so would like to hone in where we are now and what do we need to do the most to make sure that where the ideas where we want to go are met in our actions right now. And as Dr. Ken said, it's so important. What happens in other parts of the world is so relevant to us. As our chancellor put it, is like if you are on a 10-story building and you're on the 10th floor, and if there's a fire at the bottom of on the bottom floor, it's going to get to you at some point of time. So what's happening in other parts of the world is just as relevant to us. The idea of community, but the idea of that what happens in one place is such a huge impact on us is something that we keep in mind. And holding that as a base, I'd like to just quickly take you to some of the very key things that we have been following very closely in our work in rural India. Tarek told that most of my work is in rural India and with women in rural India. So the lessons that I will take from there, I hope will be relevant to the rest of the world. I think mostly they are. Along with Dr. Tarek, we have come up with a framework to actually map women's vulnerabilities using systems thinking. And I think there's a lot of people from that philosophy in this group. So I don't have to go into the details of that. But the idea is, how do you look at women's vulnerabilities on an individual, on a household and community levels? And I'm just pulling from some very high level things that I've seen happen across the world. One is, of course, domestic violence in households, which Gabriella touched upon. This is something that is coming across all cultures. It's ubiquitous. And the question is, how can we make homes safe? If this is going to be a repetitive pattern, I mean, we already have this as a vulnerability, but this really exacerbates the vulnerability. So how can we keep home safe? Seems to be one of the most important topics that become, not just for women, but also for children. This is a very important thing. What kind of opportunities do we have for these women? What is the kind of access they have to those opportunities? What kind of awareness do they have of the fact that there are certain opportunities that are there and how they can actually access them? And you come to the fact is that especially in rural India, you don't have a lot of those things in place. Like you said, in France, domestic violence, they're being aggressive about how they address it, but those kind of opportunities are not there for many parts of the world, and there's something that you really have to look into. Second is on a household level, another important thing that's coming up is education of the girl child, whether it's due to financial constraints or social cultural dimensions. There's a lot that is going to impact the education of the girl child. If the family doesn't have enough money because of the financial crisis to educate their children, they're going to prefer the male child over the female child. What are the things that we're going to put into place, make sure that the female child's education is not going to? This is a huge thing. These are all very big topics, but they stand at a very precarious point right now. The third thing, and I'm going really fast, is our work with self-help groups. These are huge organizations that are in play in places like in India, Bangladesh. A lot of the informal economy depends on these self-help group activities. And we found that comes to a grinding halt in a lockdown, because women are dependent on meeting together and taking decisions together. So when you freeze that kind of movement and they don't have anything else to fall back on, how are they going to go about their economic activity at these kind of situations? And these are three of the very major points that we kind of, I mean, there's so much, but just from this and just lessons that I thought really need to come across is one, is that you have, somehow technology enablement has to happen at a very, very grassroots level. For rural women in India, for girl children, this is something that is almost fundamental. Major part of the access is going to come through technology, especially during lockdown, and that should be in the hands of every individual. Second is you have to take men along. You cannot underestimate the amount of awareness that needs to go out into families about educating their children equally, to men about treating their women right. This is another thing that has to happen at an individual. Very strong awareness campaigns against domestic violence and child sexual abuse and children's abuse in general should happen. Right now, and the whole strategy the focus should be around the family as a unit, because that's kind of how things have been contained right now. And if that system is not secure, then everything is going to fall apart, no matter what we do. And so very strong ways to address the family as a unit. And if I would like to end on a slightly positive note, there's also a lot of speculation that most of the countries that did really very well in addressing the COVID crisis were all led by women leaders. And our organization is also led by a woman leader, and she did an amazing job at keeping this huge community really safe. And we've not had one single instance of COVID in our community, even though we're like right next to all kinds of hotspots and we're very exposed community. So there's something to be said about it. Now, it may be that women have an instinctive parallel conversation always in their mind about the well-being of the child, no matter what they're doing. They're always thinking about their child somewhere in the background. And maybe that instinctively it kicks in somehow subconsciously, and therefore maybe the women leaders also consider the country as their children. And maybe there's something to be said for women leadership. Now, this is not proven. I'm sure there are plenty of really good male leaders who have been doing a fantastic job in their countries, but the record, let's see, we have Germany, we have New Zealand, Taiwan, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Finland, and our institutional leaders. So there's something to be said about women leadership. I don't know if I've taken 6 minutes because I really tend to talk a lot. But the idea is that maybe there's something that can be done to actually encourage women's leadership. And maybe these are the ways forward in terms of gender and COVID.